What is up, guys? Thank you so much for being here. So today I'm doing the full review of my Sigma 10-18 ultra-wide zoom lens for all your Sony APS-C cameras. I'm coming off being pretty sick, so we'll see how my voice does throughout the video. But we're gonna go ahead and start with the build quality and specs of the lens, and then I'll get into some of the pros and cons, and I'll wrap it up with who this lens might be for or what I use it for. This lens has a minimum focus distance of 4.6 inches or about 11.7 centimeters. It weighs 9 ounces or 255 grams, total length of 2.5 inches. Also it has a 67mm filter thread, which I really like because that's kind of common with a lot of my other lenses, so I can use the same filters easily. It also has a little rubber gasket along the back right here to help seal it, so it is dust and water resistant. It's not like waterproof or anything, so don't go dropping this in a lake or whatever, but it is nice that it actually is resistant because that gasket helps out quite a bit to keep little dust spots from getting on your sensor. As for how the lens actually feels, I mean, for one, it's super small and compact, which is nice, and for being as small as it is, it actually feels kind of dense, so it just kind of gives it that like high quality feel. Doesn't feel cheap by any means. One thing that's a little interesting is the lens hood. It kind of pops on. You know, most of the time with a lens hood, you put it on and you turn it. This one is a little tricky at first. You gotta line it up right, and then you just kind of push it, and that's it. I think it has maybe a slight turn, but it mostly just pops on, so it's a little different than your average lens hood. As for the focus ring right here, it's pretty slim, but it's got a decent texture and it's very smooth. It turns pretty easily. And then the zoom ring has a little bit more resistance, and the texture is a little bit more aggressive, which I like. And I also like that from the widest point of the zoom at 10 all the way to 18, it's less than a quarter turn. So it makes it pretty easy if you just want to do a slight zoom. You know, you don't have to turn it all the way around. Go ahead and get into some of the pros of the lens because I've had a chance to use this a lot. I got it when it first came out last fall, and so I've taken it to the Oregon coast, taken it into desert caves, on other hikes and photo shoots. So I've used this thing quite a bit and I have a good amount of experience with it. Now the top two pros of this lens when comparing it to other APS-C ultra-wide zoom lenses, I'm gonna say are the compact size and the sharpness. Obviously this thing's super tiny, which makes it nice to keep in your bag or even just on your actual lens. It's super small and compact, so you don't draw a lot of attention. And then the sharpness, now I haven't compared it to every single ultra-wide zoom lens that exists, but I did used to own the Sony 10-18, the older one, and I can say that this is much sharper than that. And I currently own the Tamron 11-20, which is probably its biggest competitor, and I'm gonna be releasing a video pretty soon comparing those two lenses, since I do think that they're probably the two best ultra-wide zoom lenses for your Sony APS-C cameras. But I'll tell you, this one definitely won the sharpness. They're pretty similar in the middle, but on the corners is where it made a big difference. This one was a lot sharper in the corners, but it's still kind of up in the air on which one I'm gonna keep, so you'll wanna stick around and watch that video because there's a lot more to a lens than just sharpness, and you'd be surprised at how many things the Tamron was actually a little better at. It was pretty even. They each had quite a bit of advantages over the other. Another pro of this lens is the sun flare control. Sometimes when you have your lens at an angle from the sun and you don't have the hood on, maybe you're using an ND filter or whatever, but sometimes you're gonna get that sun flare, but this was actually shockingly good. So I was actually surprised because I almost couldn't even get it to like actually create a sun flare, even with the sun right here, and I was completely passing over the sun. I'm not saying it never does it, but in this particular test where I'm purposely going past the sun, you know, back and forth and having that angle, and it just wouldn't even create one. So I was actually really impressed at how well it controlled that. A couple of the last pros I would say are the f2.8 aperture and the price, because it is slightly cheaper, not much, but it is a little cheaper than all the other options out there, I think by about 50 bucks. And then obviously the reason you're probably looking at this lens is that f2.8 aperture, because as far as I'm aware, there's only two options out there for Sony APS-C when it comes to having a good f2.8 ultra-wide zoom lens, and that's this one and that Tamron. But that f2.8 really is a big deal. I mean, that's what allows you to have some of that shallow depth of field, which is really hard to come by on any kind of ultra wide zoom lens like this. And then obviously it also helps big time when it comes to low light. Whether you're doing shots at night or just indoors, it's gonna make a big difference versus an f4. Because as it is with an APS-C camera, your ISO is not going to be quite as clean as a full frame camera, so you can't just keep boosting that up. And the fact that it's not as large of a sensor, you're always going to want to try and do everything that you can to get a little bit better low light performance. Now as for some of the cons, it does seem to have a little bit more vignetting on the corners and also a little bit more distortion. Obviously, anytime you have an ultra wide lens down at 10 millimeters, 11 millimeters, you're going to have a lot of distortion, but I just feel like this one maybe has slightly more, even at the same focal lengths as some other lenses. You know, it's not really a big deal. Again, it's an ultra wide lens, you're gonna have distortion, and distortion and vignetting are a one-click fix. I mean, at least with photos, just click on that lens correction and both of those are gone. And then also for you bokeh snobs, so those are gonna be like the out of focus balls of light that you see in the background. A lot of people like to get nitpicky with those. To me, I don't really think it makes that big of a difference. This one does seem to have a little bit more cat-eyed shaped bokeh. It's also not quite as smooth. It seems to have a different kind of tone in the middle compared to the outside. Again, I'm gonna get into all those details when I compare it to the Tamron in my next video. And again, not really a big deal. I would say probably the number one con, which didn't even happen that often. It kind of goes with one of the pros, which I actually forgot to mention. I think that the autofocus on this thing is one of its pros because it is very snappy. It doesn't really hunt or anything like that. But to go along with the fact that it is a pro, one of the cons to me was the fact that once in a while, not all the time, and I couldn't always recreate it, but once in a while it seemed like this one would struggle when doing any kind of backlit stuff. So if I had a person there and they were backlit, sometimes, you know, I wasn't surprised because they were extremely backlit. It was almost just like a silhouette. And so obviously it's gonna focus on whatever's in the background. But then there was a few times where it wasn't completely a silhouette of a person. They were what I thought plenty bright, just a little bit shadowy compared to the background that was more bright. And even in some of those situations, I would get home and see that some of the photos were not in focus and it was focusing on the background. And so that was a little bit surprising. Again, overall, autofocus is a pro, but it is something to keep an eye on and something that I'll do a little bit more testing on as I'm finishing up that comparison video with the other lens. Now, as for who should buy this lens, I think if you're looking for a lens for vlogging, content creation, real estate, landscape, anything where you want basically an ultra wide zoom lens that offers a little bit more low light potential for nighttime because of that f2.8 aperture, you definitely can't go wrong buying this lens. I think you'll be super happy if you get it, but if you're not in a hurry, I would say to just wait until I do my review. It'll probably be the next video that I do, comparing this guy to the Tamron, because there are a couple things, you know, to compare between the two that you might like a little bit more with the Tamron. And this thing has worked great on my Sony full frame camera, on my a7 IV, which I'm actually recording on right now, because I don't actually own a ultra wide zoom lens for my full frame camera yet because they're just really expensive and I just haven't gotten around to wanting to spend the money on that yet. And I've been able to get away with using this no problem, so that's part of why I haven't. And so lately, anytime I've needed any kind of wide shot or wanted to vlog on my a7 IV, I've just thrown this guy on there and it's worked fine. And if you guys have any questions whatsoever, definitely let me know in the comments down below. And I just want to thank you guys so much for watching till the end of the video. I really appreciate it. If you got anything out of it, definitely hit the like button. Super simple thing, takes about 1 second, but makes a big difference for my channel. So I would really appreciate that as well. And if you like this kind of content, anything that's to do with lens reviews, camera gear, camera backpacks, drone stuff, definitely subscribe. I've got a good amount of videos on my channel, but I'll be putting out a lot more in the future. But with all that being said, I just want to thank you so much again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.